Greetings, Marsh here, and welcome to episode 251 of my modded Factorio playthrough. In this episode, we are going to talk about the crafting Combinator mod and get these crystallizers all set up. Enjoy! So here, with our crystallizers, we now have an output of the recipe that we want to run. So it's slightly different. Before, we were outputting the resource that was the lowest that we wanted to create more of. Now we're saying which recipe actually should turn on or off. So it's kind of similar, but also kind of different. So let's cover how these crafting combinators work. So there's essentially two of them, the crafting combinator and the recipe combinator. The recipe combinator is something that you can use for a complicated setup that uses lots of crafting combinators where, as you can just read it there, outputs the ingredients or products of a recipe. So basically, you can just read one of those recipe signals and then output what is actually required to run them. So your logistics system can bring the resources necessary. So that will allow one machine to be serviced by like bots, for example, while its recipe keeps changing. So it's quite useful for that. But for now, all we really need is the crafting combinator, which sets or reads the recipe of an assembler. And that's what actually changes what it does. So we want one of those. And while we're here, let's see if we can just make a crystallizer. It looks like I already have one in the inventory. So we can put it wherever. Let's just place it here for now to see how it works. Where we have something here that can have any recipe we want. It doesn't matter. And then this combinator here, and I believe it has a specific way that it goes on. I believe it is the wire hookups go towards the machine. I could be wrong on that, but we'll find out. And it has lots of settings. Now the crafting combinator itself has a chest. So basically, if it changes the recipe, then it changes the slots that are available here. And yep, it's definitely hooked up right because it's not letting the recipes stay. So if I come in here, now the recipes are staying. So let's say it changes the recipe. Well, what happens to the resources that are stuck in the machine? They have to go somewhere. So the reason why this has a chest in it is so the resources can get sucked into there in the event that the recipe changes. Let's just hook it back up and it fixes it. And also, you can use an overflow chest as well to just push resources out of that if necessary. And it has two modes, reading and writing. In this situation, we want to write signals, not read them. And lots of settings here. So it has an overflow chest, but if you select wait for output to clear, you won't need to. So in this situation, if the recipe changes, it will wait for the machine to have its input resources removed. I guess I should flip it over again just to show. It'll wait for these to be empty before it actually changes the recipe. That prevents resources from getting thrown into the combinator or an overflow, and it also prevents the resources from just getting deleted, which is important because these don't produce resources very fast, so we really don't want them to be kind of wasting them. So by selecting this, it means that the recipe won't actually switch on the machine until it's empty. And if you want it to dump resources, you can do this. And we really don't want it to discard fluids. I don't know. I didn't check it to see that if the recipe changes, but the input fluid is the same, does the fluid actually stay in there or is it deleted? But let's not take any risks. So if you disable discard items and fluids, nothing actually will get wasted. And I guess the empty inserter's hands also helps for that. I guess I'll leave it selected. Shouldn't matter if it's wait for output to clear anyway. But I imagine the inserter's hands, it's not for output when something is ejecting out. It's probably for input. So let's say it had an input of, I don't know, catalyst or something. Well, the hand would swing over and hold and wait. So if the recipe changes, it no longer needs that catalyst. But now, whatever the input resource is for this inserter, it's now clogged because it's hanging on to that item. So I believe what this will do, I haven't tested it, so maybe it doesn't work that way, but what I believe that it does is it will empty that inserter's hand and throw it into the overflow and allow the machine to operate. So it seems like something you'd probably want to keep selected. And this seems to be, I haven't tested it again, so I'm just kind of making sense of it. But it seems to be a sort of latch that once it's told to do something, it will continue to do it until that signal is completely gone. And in this situation, it's not terribly relevant because there'll only ever be one signal. I'm not sure what it would save, but it does seem like it would be relevant to how we have this set up. But it seems to be like a latch, so if you have multiple input signals, then once it's been turned on, it won't just keep switching to different signals. It will stay on until the input is turned off. So, we might as well leave it on. We'll see if it makes a difference. But now, we'll swing it the right direction. It turns everything off, and now we need to control it. And let's just do a tiny little circuit here. Let's do a constant combinator. And how about 2 deciders? So we'll put the deciders there, constant here. So let's just say, just for the purpose of this test, it's looking for a green square. And if it gets it, the output will be about the recipe to make iron and copper. And let's say, if it doesn't get the green signal, the output will be, how about for lead and tin? Connect it all together. And now we're getting something that there is no input signal, which means the output is going to be lead and tin. So thus it is set to lead and tin. So now let's say, here's a green signal. It switches to the iron and copper. So you see that we can switch this on demand to change those. And we can kind of remove all this because we've already done the calculation where if we hook this up here, it's now been set to do our zinc and titanium. So that'll be a little simpler than a lot of what's going on here, because the only thing that needs a wire is the crafting combinator, and then these will just output everything onto their one belt. So we won't need to have all these different sets. We won't need to have all these wires going everywhere. It'll just be one set of machines. So it'll react much faster and just be smaller and more efficient. And I'm glad I started this research now, because you see that these higher tiers, even in all that talking, haven't even gotten through titanium yet, but it could have been where in the beginning it was fast because there was an excess of science, a buffer. But now nothing's happening. So why is that? Well, we've got no blue. And blue isn't running because this one is missing. It seems like that's the fuel oil, probably. Wonder how the drones are doing. There's still kind of some empty drones running around. I've got a command here to use to try to fix it. And it's all of this. I guess I'll put it in a comment below that if you're having issues, you can try running that command and see if it fixes it. But there goes the command. Kind of took a second, hopefully. Nothing got super broken. But now, we should be seeing drones picking up their resources again, because I guess the temperature levels just inside the depots is just set wrong because of Factorio base game errors or something like that. So many empty drones. It's like they all can't possibly be empty. You can see how like 100% of the fluid drones are empty. I'm like, that's not right. You would expect half of them to be empty, not all of them. But now hopefully it should actually pick up resources again. Like, well, that one didn't. But it was already sent, so shrug. And that one did. And that was already an empty drone. That was actually doing a request. So that's probably why the other one was empty too, is because those were requests. Where these ones are actually picking up. So that was a request that was made. And you can kind of tell that it looks like it's getting fixed now, because instead of 5 out of 5, it's 4 out of 5. So those are probably just drones on the end of their cycle. So this one comes through. Well, it was an empty drone on the end of its cycle, so it didn't pick up anything. Because the pickup depots are the fluid depots, while the drop-off depots are the request ones. So it might just take a second of all of these drones running through their paths. But hopefully we should start seeing drones with stuff on them now, and we kind of are. You can see that now suddenly we're seeing non-empty drones. Lots of ones running through that oxygen, because we have a ton of it that was just never being picked up. So I was actually kind of thinking that one potential problem with the science of the factory is that Yeah, that's another empty drone, but they should all be picking stuff up now. That one potential problem of running science is just it would completely clog. Well, I believe that is why it isn't running, is because we have no fuel oil. And that is something that needs to be delivered, which is why there are drones making requests here. But because of the problems with transport drones, it's just it was never making it. But I kind of want to make sure. Let's see, is that our first one that finally went through the whole cycle? Ah, it's so nice to see non-empty drones again. So I'm glad I didn't completely change how the drones worked. Hey, look at that, another non-empty one. Because eventually I got that command, so hopefully it's fixed at some point. Usually if it is part of the Factorio-based game, that Factorio devs are really good about fixing bugs, so hopefully this gets fixed in the next version, because the maker of Transport Drone says it wasn't a problem with his mod. He said it was a problem with the Factorio itself. So it kind of was a lot of fingers getting pointed here. Okay, that was just for the fuel. A lot of fingers getting pointed, where angels changed the temperature of the fluids, which caused the transport drones not to work, and then the transport drones point the finger at the base game having a bug. But nonetheless, I got that command to fix it, so I am happy now, and just hopefully it doesn't come up and I have to keep using the command, and it gets fixed later. Hey, look at that. Making those requests. Hopefully it just gets fixed later, so other people won't have to deal with this. But I really want to see where all these drones are. There we go. Hopefully, yeah, there's a couple of them now, so those can all be for fuel for drones. And yeah, I guess so. Some of them delivered because we're starting to see some movement again. So it must be getting delivered. Hopefully 10 drones ends up being enough. Guess we can find out exactly how fast it needs to be, but let's make sure it delivers here. And probably is going to go back out again. Yep. Well, it delivered, so that's good. So how much do we actually need? It looks like it's only these two machines, and it's 27 per second, which isn't that much. So we'll have to let it keep going for a while. If a little bit more talking later, and it still hasn't caught up, then we might perhaps need a little more. Although, it does say fuel oil 100% now, which tells me that it is running faster than the drones are delivering. But does the drone get by right as this level starts to go down? Kinda, but he delivered. So, I guess we'll just have to be patient there. Just let it keep doing its thing. So we have our logic, we have our crafting combinator. Now we just need to figure out a build. And it's kind of tricky because there's so many different sources of making the mineral sludge at this point, and they're all separate from each other, and it's not like they're all perfectly balanced or anything. So figuring out how big to make this is going to be kind of tricky. So how about let's see what it does now and go from there. So one of these setups would be this. And if it's to be believed, it's 1.5K of input, which is pretty much the max that a pipe could ever do. And I suppose that's fairly accurate. I feel like that's slightly too high. I feel like the maximum is more like 1.2, but I guess we'll go with that since we only have the one pipe anyway. That's all we can really do. So let's just get rid of that and make a new line, and all of them will be the same. So we might as well just pick iron and copper here using crystallizer 2. And interestingly, they do use productivity modules, which I would not have expected them to do. Well, that might make this setup extremely large then. Well, let's see how large. We'll just use the one module for now and set it to input. And actually, just as a direct comparison, we'll make it 1500 to see. So that is 218 machines. And that's a little bit bigger than one of these setups. But the advantage being that it would run all of the different recipes here. So we might as well, it's free resources if we're willing to take up the space to do it. so there's really no reason to smash it down. But I think this number would be more appropriate if it was more like 1200. So something like this. And how much of this is actually going to need to get rebuilt? Well, we can pull this out here. Unfortunately, probably quite a bit. But I also don't want to move a bunch of stuff if we can avoid it. It'll look kind of funny having a big empty space right here. It's possible that we can actually start the machines from the right to leave this open for stuff. That might make more sense since the land is already used here. I'm not sure if it would get used for anything else. It doesn't seem like it. So let's go from the right to the left. And it's a set of old machines, so there's kind of some stuff in here that isn't relevant. Like we want to replace all these pipes. We'll want to replace pretty much everything here. Do the robots not reach out here? I guess not. Well, that makes this happen a little faster. Okay. Well, we've got our pipes right here. They connect. And the output, which would be in the same exact spot as before. And the only difference here is that now we need to have these combinators in here, which does create a bit of an issue because there's not a lot of space in here for this. And I believe they do need to be attached to every machine. It's kind of weird when there's no recipe, you can't rotate these, so that might be a problem. We might have to wait until there's actually a recipe attached to them so they can all be rotated. That would be rather annoying. I'll make one more machine here, just so we have a pattern, and I guess that means remove all of this. Let's see, we can save a space by running that across. I guess we can save a underground belt by just not being able to walk through here. I don't know how annoying that might end up being, but I don't know. Being able to walk through all the machines does kind of help a little bit. So that will allow a power pole to go in here, and the power pole will be necessary to send the signal. And let's see if we can alternate every other machine and get them all covered by the same power poles. Kinda seems like it. There is an empty space right here, but as long as nothing goes in that empty space, it should be fine. I kinda want to run a power pole over here just to make sure that it all connects. So it would get a light like every 2 machines. And we probably do want to extend the robot network out here, because getting robots to help is nice. And some parking spots. So we have our repeating pattern now. It's going to be kind of dense in here. I don't know if the robots are going to be able to reach all the way to the end without us putting some artificial spaces in here. But let's extend it down as far as we can, because robots are nice. Alright, so we are getting some research, so how is that fuel doing? Okay. We're back up to where we need to be. So the bots have been fast enough to keep us topped off here. So far so good. Well, all of this is getting replaced. It's going to be similar, but different enough, because it's going to be different machines, different pipes, that we should probably just replace the whole thing. Looks like a radar is going to get replaced in this process. Make sure it didn't get anything we didn't supposed to. I think we're good. Of course, now the robots are helping out, but we'll put a radar here in the end once everything is placed. That's amazing how fast they work when they can actually access stuff. Oh, the crawler might help in this situation, but it's kind of out there and I don't know if I want to get it. We are going to need to make a bunch of these combinators, but I don't know if it's something we're going to be making enough of in the factory to matter. But this is Factorio, So it probably should be automated if possible. So we're going to replace a lot of this stuff so we can just kind of pick it up. We don't need the logic either. Okay, let's make some of these recipe combinators, because we're going to need one for every single machine. At least as far as I understand how the mod works, that's what you need. Let's see, where to make these? Well, probably next to where the other combinators are being made, because I imagine the input resources are rather similar. That it's just electronic boards and cable. And we've already got a cable here. And it looks like a lot of these machines could benefit from the better set of modules. But instead of going through everything right now, I'll just take care of this stack. There we go, crafting combinator. That'll run until we have 50, and you can see the bots are immediately picking them up and taking them to where they need to go. Looks like most of this got cleared out. So let's get it all set up here. Gotta be careful that all of these wires are hooked up. All of these are configured. For now, we want to just check that it works. So let's send this all the way down here. But before we connect it, let's just make sure all these settings are correct. We want it to write, wait for the output to clear, don't discard anything, empty the hands, and craft until 0. Okay, so if this is all configured, they should all just switch. And we'll do this. And it looks like they do. Of course, they're pointed the wrong way, so we're gonna have to fix that. And I hope when this pattern is copied over that the robots put them in the correct orientation. We don't have to hook up the wire first to do that. Pretty good. Actually, one other thing I want to test is if the signal's gone, what happens? Okay, they disable. And what's interesting is the pipe connection disappears because the recipe is gone. So then when we hook it back up, it remembers the orientation. So that's what we need, but we need 175 of them. And we currently have 40. So let's start putting them down here. That will be our 80. And then this can be the 120. And we'll probably want to have some more robots right around here to make sure that it all reaches. So it would be something like this. So it's going to have some gap in here. But what can you do if you want robots to reach everything? Or at least to give us our logistic zone everywhere. That's what we're going to have to do. So that's our 120. Let's do 160. And how about just 200? Just to get everything fully covered. So what does the radar look like? Well, it seems like it's covered just fine here. I'm not terribly sure why a radar was there, but I guess it doesn't quite cover some of these tracks, so we should probably put some in here. Probably just on the corner would be the best, like right there. So that's still not covered, but I guess it would have to be like down here. There probably is a radar down here somewhere. Maybe that one, so perhaps to cover this, we would need a radar like right there, hopefully. Okay, well now we wait. Robots should be on the way, they are. We need to get all this connected. And it's going to be not quite a red belt, but kind of close to it. Well, despite how many machines are here, it's actually way less than there was before, so it's pretty good. Keep this connected and hooked up there, but I guess unhook that for now, just in case we change our mind about anything. Going to need to hook the pipes across here, and one thing I like about doing it in this way is that now we don't have to have all of this crazy logic for the pipes, because so many resources could be stuck in pipes and not be processed, that they can just fill up all the way, and the recipes will change organically, and we won't have to worry about it. So we need none of this. Just something hooked up the normal way. And I'll leave that unhooked for a second. We can hook that back up. And I guess we just don't have any resources right now. Basically, yeah, that we need to be above 80,000 of slag to actually be consuming it in this way. So we won't see much running right now. Might be worth letting the factory go a bit, so we can actually test it when it's working properly. For consistency, let's run the signal across here, at least up until that point. And stone backed up again, which is good. Now it's going to fill up to 70,000 to give that a little bit more of a buffer, so every time the bus turns off it doesn't just keep emptying all the stone out. And we're waiting on the modules here. But the logic seems good, where the lowest thing that it says that we need is the zinc and titanium, which makes sense. Zinc isn't very low, but of course titanium is, and when you have very few processing methods, and you have a priority system like mine, that the things that you can't make very many ways end up having a rather low number, and things that you can make a lot of ways, like iron, tend to have a high number. So basically it means that perpetually things like titanium and gold are always going to get priority in this setup, which is good, because they are things we tend to be low on anyway. But I believe that is this setup hooked up. We're just not really going to see much. Maybe the robots don't reach quite over there, but we're just not going to see much of it until we've got some resources to process. No, they can reach, right? Yeah. They're just taking their time, right? Yeah. How are we doing on the research here? Okay, almost done. That's good. We can add some more in there. And how has the bus been doing in our absence? Looks like it is caught back up again. Doing well. Processing all of those resources. Lots of 0 out of 1s now instead of maxed for every single drone type. So it seems like the drones are flowing again, which is fantastic. And the resources are moving around, as we would expect, so that's great. Okay, so we did the solder. So the way this works is ingots are melted down into silicon, and then nitrogen is added. And then these seeds are made, and then from the seeds come the monosilicon. Well, now we have another tier of it, where the idea is still the same. We still need to make the seed, but now we have a quartz crucible that is required, which just requires a little bit of silicon, which is funny because that's what we're making anyway, so it's not like it comes from very far away. And then we get our silicon output and 80% chance of getting the crucible back. So that's just a little bit of logic, but all of the resources are already there, so it's not that difficult to do. And we've got our silver to do and aluminum. And there's no extra processing tiers right now because it's going to require the purple science. And same with aluminum. And at the beginning here, we do make our Invar and steel. So we do have a better version of steel, where we add nickel, which is a great way of getting rid of nickel, and some cobalt to make it. And that does use cobalt, which kind of sucks, but the thing that makes steel expensive is the fact that 4 iron have to go into it to make a steel. So if only a third of the mixture is actually those 4 irons, that makes this a lot more materially efficient. So we might actually want to do it even if cobalt isn't a very efficient way of making stuff. But certainly with the nickel, so I guess it all depends on the nickel status. Maybe with the cobalt it won't matter, but if we're overloaded on nickel then we will. So let's check what we got here. Well, I think we found that titanium was all mixed down the same thing here, and it is. But cobalt's a little different. That to make our cobalt steel, we just add 12 cobalt to 12 steel, and that gives us the plates. And it's an ingot, so there's no coil version. And it goes down from there. We can save that processing for when we get to that point. And might as well check everything else here. It looks like the only processing type that we're not doing is zinc, and that's to make the coils. We might as well research it, but we're not making zinc in plate form right now because we just don't need it for anything. But that might change. So zinc plates. Well, it doesn't go into much. Thorium and deuterium fuel cells, but the silver zinc battery is where it goes. And that's battery 3. So we got battery 2 there. So battery 3 is purple. It's not that far away. We've got some other things we would have to do, but really it's kind of interesting where battery 2 is right here, which we can do now. And then all we have to do is do purple science, and then bam, we can do battery 3s. So we're going to upgrade our battery technology rather fast. So in that case, we probably should be making the zinc coils at this point, because we are going to start needing them. Not very much of them, but I mean, we need them, so we might as well. And for now, I think that is basically all of the research that we need to do. So that's good. We took care of a little bit of that, so we didn't have to wait for it. I just kind of wish we could see this in action, but we're just not quite at that point yet. We need a couple more thousand slag. All right, we're backing up on crushed stone now because the warehouse has finally got to 70,000. So the stone is backing up. Then when it gets to this point, it starts using the bypass, which is making the slurry more directly. So all this stuff doesn't have to go down the bus here. And slag isn't quite at 80,000, but crushed stone being at 70 will start producing at least a little bit of extra sludge here, which should reduce the amount of slag that has to go into making it, which is now going to slowly build up slag. Well, for now, to test this, because we're done with our research, so we'll be able to move on from here, but I do want to test this to make sure it all works. So for now, let's just remove the input condition from this pump, so it's always going to work. And all these other methods are going to fill the sludge up. But if we come down here, it's filling up our tank, which is looking good. So all of our machines are in place. We should have our 200 of them. And we do, when we needed 175. So it's telling us that we want to make titanium and zinc. And all the recipes are set. And does that make sense? It does. That titanium is our lowest ore, and zinc is not overloaded, so it makes sense that that's what it wants. And it's never really going to make cobalt, because we discussed that cobalt also makes tungsten, which we can't process right now. So let's just see how it works. So let's say it did have its slurry. What would happen? Well, it would flow down, and they would all start turning on. It might help to have a pump in there, just because it potentially could be a high flow thing here. So having a pump in there will make sure that it's good, but they're starting to fill up. Just needs to get all the way to the back. It all does seem connected. It's just going to take a moment, but it's getting pretty close. So here's our output. It's kind of funny looking with those colors, but let's pipe it into the system. And each one of these holds like 200 of each ore, so it'll go a long time without getting overloaded, which is also kind of another problem of using them in general, is that they could just keep going. So even if you disable the inserters, they'll just fill up. So it's not great. But we've got all greens. I wonder what kind of output that is on the pump. Well, it looks like the pump is putting out about 1500, so we are getting that kind of flow out of it, but it's a short distance. But that said, we're not completely maxed out. So that makes me think that we could potentially get a little bit more. So let's compute this by factory. We know we have 200 of these. So that means we are consuming our 1376. And yeah, that's about what it's doing. Well, let's unhook everything again. Give it a chance to fill up. Well, it looks like definitely the factory couldn't keep up with that. But it may later. But those ores are going up. They're taking the winding path they'll need to make. And then it'll come around here, go up here, and get sent to where they need to go. Okay, do the robots reach over here? Kinda. Let's copy one more of these. So if we had 240 of them, that would be 1650. That seems like a lot. But there goes the ore. And the titanium is getting captured. And the zinc will fill up, I guess, until it gets maxed out, because I think the only thing that the zinc actually goes into right now is making the solder. Which that is the case. I wonder, are there any other things we can use it for? Okay, so we are using it for brass and bronze, and the gunmetal. So it does go into a few things, but it kind of doesn't in a way. It's kind of interesting in that sense where it has its things it goes into, but it's kind of a byproduct resource with the exception of those batteries and fuel cells. But we'll see how it works. Seems pretty good so far and looks like it's emptying out there. So we'll just get this built and give it a shot. And as the level goes up, eventually it'll switch over into gold, but I don't know if it's going to do that during our tests here. Get it hooked up. Everything switches over. Seems like we're ready for another test. So we hook it up and it'll just trash the factory here, but kind of want to see what can output. Well, and we can also just hover over this to see that it seems like at maximum it's getting about 1550 or so. So if it's 1650 for all of these, that should max out this pump. I'm actually kind of surprised you can get that kind of output, but it is an upgraded pump. So it does help a little bit, but kind of like with everything with Factorio fluids, the further the distance the fluid has to go, the harder it's going to be. And you can see the factory definitely can't keep up with this because it's going down, down, down. Because yeah, that is going at full blast, going through all that slag. And all the other systems that can run are. But we're getting lots of greens. Looks like it doesn't quite make it to the end of some of these, which is what we would expect, since we have more machines than that pump can keep up with. Okay, and it's about to be empty. So let's hook the logic back up. And it'll fill up to 40% again. And stop. And the stone byproducts will balance themselves out again. And that's basically how that works. It'll just choose whatever the lowest thing is and make it as required. So looking great. Well, from here, the next thing we're going to need to do is upgrade all of these ingot setups, both to use our faster machines and better modules, but also to have the next tier of processing where relevant. But that's going to have to wait till the next episode. Thanks for watching, and I will see you later.